Wow, look at that cute little guy. If you're new around here, this is a recap and a behind the scenes of my Ironman series. Linked below will be the main playlist if you want to watch it all. I actually do suggest that if you haven't watched it, that you do go watch that, but if you would rather just watch the recaps and get to the new content, that's okay as well. Anyway though, let's get into it. First, I just wanted to show this beauty of a cinematic shot. I really had no clue what I was doing, and I was just kind of having fun. Speaking of not knowing what I was doing, I somehow cut out half of this clip where I was doing a quiz to pick my class. It was a whole bit that I had set up, and somehow I cut out all of the setup. It was not till like episode 2 or 3 that I noticed this, and by that point I thought it was too late to fix it. After creating my Musa, we got started with Ancient Stone Chamber. And because I didn't think to explain it to anybody, I did something really perplexing. I deleted all my gear. The reason I did this is because in my mind, I considered it as quest gear, which is against the rules. I also thought it would be funny, which is probably more of the reason why I did it. I then proceeded to go and punch wolves for a quest, which I found out didn't work at all. I had to come up with a new plan, which was me going to the Western Guard Post, buying a sword for like 14k silver, which sounds like nothing, but remember, I can't even kill a single monster. Luckily, I found out that you can get Fairy's Dust from Gathering, which sells for 10k, so I just needed to get 2 of that, and I bought myself a new sword. I then proceeded on the questline through most of Balanos, and with a little cash in hand from that and some login rewards, I tried enhancing some Hessus rings, and I got up to Pry. Huge, am I right? I think it's like 2 DP or something like that. I was nearing the end of the quest and realized that I would want a horse, but due to my rules, I had to go out and catch one. I then went to go finish the quests, and it took forever, so I decided that I needed to go back to Western Guard Camp and buy one of the blue weapons, which tripled my AP. I then caught another horse so that I could do some breeding attempts later, and claimed all of the codes that were available, which I don't allow anymore. Episode 2 was centered around workers. I initially purchased a worker from the player-worker exchange. Oops. After setting him up on the potato farm, I realized my mistake and fired him immediately. I set up all my nodes and made some beer to feed my workers. Watching this episode back made me realize how little I knew about the worker system. After getting everything set up, I finished the questline up through all of Serendia and ended that episode at the gates to Calpheon territory. I started off episode 3 doing the Calpheon questline. I realized that the mobs in this area, like the Harpies, dropped gear, which was pretty fun to get. None of it was any good, but hey, at least it's something. During this process, I also wanted to connect Velia to Calpheon through nodes, and this is where I learned that you can manage nodes without spending energy by talking to the nodes manager. I realize now that this is the only way to do it without a value pack. I made it to Catfish Camp, the first real grind spot. I say real, but can you really call it that? I also had access to Manchas, Rudums, and Treant's Forest. One cool thing about all these 4 spots is that they have an accessory set. Each spot dropped a different piece, and my goal was to get this full set, and hopefully some defense gearboxes along the way. I got both earrings at Catfish and also hit level 52, those earrings giving me an extra 10 AP. With those earrings in hand, I decided to move on to Manchas for the rings, and I got both of those, but I decided that I wanted to get all of the knowledge before I left, so I started trying to kill ogres, which I did have a bunch of close calls with, but I ultimately was able to get that knowledge. With that all done, I moved on to Rudums, which is where I started getting defense gear, and got the Treant's belt for my accessory set. For some reason, I only grinded out enough gear for all slots but my gloves, so I'm not sure what I was thinking, but whatever. I moved on to Treant's Forest, I hit level 54 there, and I finished my accessory set. After getting that, I was up to 77 AP, and I was for some reason at 14 DP. I was at 18 earlier. I am so confused at how that happened. One of my rings must have had DP on it or something. I then moved to Hex Sanctuary, which has a recommended DP of 140. 10 times higher than what I was at. At least if I die, the consequences are so minimal that it really doesn't matter. While I was there, I got some witch's earrings and enhanced them to pry, which gave me an upgrade, so I already broke my set. I hit level 55 and got a Liberto from the level up rewards, which I threw away immediately. I got a Urea blade, which I started enhancing and got it up to plus 13, which brought my AP up to 108. Because my DP was so low, I decided to upgrade that armor and got my DP to 88, and I finished off the Calpheon questline. This allowed me to start the fairy quest, and remember that one of my goals is to get a passable fairy, so I'm looking for Tier 5, medium level feathery steps, and continuous care. Doing this quest made me realize that I needed to get cooking honey, which I had no idea how to do. I had to figure out how to get and use a matchlock, and I just remember how fun it was to figure out all this type of stuff back when I started, because I never did this type of thing on my main account. I got my first fairy, which was a tier 4, and started leveling it up, and the first skill was Tingling Breath. Sad. And with that, I ended episode 3. Episode 4 was all about adventure logs, and being really bad at the game while trying to play Ironman. This is probably the video that I cringed the most at because of all of the stupid mistakes I made. Having hit level 55 at some point, I unlocked the ability to do Igor Bartoli's adventure log. I ran into a problem of trying to catch a yellow grade fish, and I spent at least 3 or 4 hours trying to catch it. I gave up, but spoiler alert, I was just fishing in the wrong area. But back then, I thought that I just needed a new fishing rod. So I did something that pains me so much to watch back. I used my rough stone to make black stone powder. Ooh, that hurts. I also bought some Logia tools and started enhancing those, but stopped due to being low on blackstones. I know I said this episode was focused on adventure logs, but I made a detour to do the first few sections of the Magnus quest to unlock transportation between storages to make it easier to make blackstone powder out of rough stone. As I was moving over to the quest, Karanda spawned, so I got distracted from doing that. And this is the last mention of the Magnus quest this whole video. I never got back to it. After getting nothing from Karanda, the Balanos field bosses spawned, so I went to kill as many of those as possible. On my first boss, I got a Liberto weapon, so I started to enhance it. I enhanced it up to plus 10, which still is worse than my current weapon, but eventually it will be the best thing until I get a boss weapon. I got 37 latent auras during this time, which was about 2 hours. This was also before the squish, but at this point it had been announced that they would be squishing the latent auras, so I knew that I wanted to stock up as many as I possibly could. I also decided that my main focus was to kill field bosses whenever I could. One thing that I didn't mention yet was the amount of resources those bosses gave me. I got a bunch of blackstones and a bunch of stacks between 10 and 30, which are amazing for enhancing and really sped up the process, although durability still is a problem. After going through what durability I felt like was okay, I moved away from my distractions and went back to the adventure log, completely forgetting about the Magnus quest. Anyway, this was February of 2024, so the Valentine's event was still around and I wanted to complete that log. I thought it would be easy. That was until I found out that it needs a special sunflower seed. If you're unfamiliar with this, that means that I had to farm sunflowers from base level and breed them to get to the special quality. Because of growing times and the amount of time left on the event, which was only 2 days, I was not sure I was going to be able to make it. So off I went to go get some fences and my sunflowers. And because it was a waiting game, I started working on gathering the other items I needed, such as logs. After finishing getting all of the logs and everything I needed, I remembered that there was something called the night market. The night market uses energy to roll for items, and you can buy them for silver, and it has the potential to drop boss items and other really good things. So I decided to go roll and see what I could get. Of course, I didn't get anything. I then realized that I actually needed my energy to finish a quest. Oops. So while I was waiting for it to recharge, I went to Abandoned Iron Mine to do some grinding. I got an Azula's Crimson Eye necklace, which was already just a huge upgrade and likely will be on my neck for a while. After my grinding session, I went back on the hunt for adventure logs, and figuring that my problem was my fishing rod, which obviously in hindsight wasn't, I went out and collected all of the raw materials I needed to make a fishing rod. One thing that I needed that I didn't have was Traces of Savagery, So I set a worker on a node and hoped that I would get 5 overnight. When I woke up and I had only 1, I realized that it wasn't gonna work. So I went over to mains and I went and got the traces. After getting those, I made the rod, and being capped on energy again, I rolled the night pen. This time, I actually did roll something. It was a Manos necklace. I really wanted to buy it, but I was 20 million short, and I had no way to get that amount of money in that short of a time, being about 15 minutes. After that disappointment, I went and did the 2 non-fishing steps in Igor Bartali's chapter 1, and then I went fishing. This time, I went to the event zone and almost immediately caught the fish. I didn't realize that I did anything wrong at the time, but looking at it now, I realized that I eventually will have the same problem, and it's gonna haunt me again. Started off episode 5 with a baby horse. Luckily, it was a T7, so I pulled it out to start training it. I also enhanced my black horn bow to plus 13, and with that, I wanted to continue the Medaya questline, but before I left, I wanted to finish the Southwest Calpheon knowledge, so I went and killed some catfish until I got that section done. After getting all of that knowledge, I went off and started the Medaya questline, along with grinding zones to get knowledge, so I got all of the knowledge in Abandoned Ironmine, Rogue's Dens, and Mains. While at Rogue's Den, I got kind of a crazy drop. It was a duo belt of Schultz the Gladiator. I wonder how rare that is. Now that my gear was doing pretty good, I decided to go and unlock Awakening. I immediately trashed the Awakening weapon because, of course, it's a quest reward, and went and bought myself a green weapon from the arms dealer in Altanova. I enhanced it up to duo, and got my Awakening AP to 140. I also opened my first Granil box, and enhanced the helmet up to plus 15. After that, I really wanted to finish the set, so off to Helms and Elric Shrine I went. At Helms, I hit level 57, got an Azula's Crimson Eye earring, and enhanced it to Pry. From Elric, I got a Granil chest and enhanced it to plus 11, and after finishing the knowledge at Elric, I went off to Sawsons, which for me is a super nostalgic zone because I really only played this game when the game was pretty new, and Medaya was brand new, so I love this zone. Of course, through the years, I've actually logged in to get rewards like the Dream Horse and the Black Star and stuff like that, but I've never really played the game until I started this account. While I was there, I ended up getting Granil boots and gloves. I was able to enhance the gloves to Pry and the boots to only plus 11. Also, in the middle of this enhancing session, I got rudely interrupted by a system update, which is actually where they squished the latent auras. At this point, I needed just 16 more latent auras to get my first boss piece. As a side note, I don't know if I really like using latent auras on an Ironman. If I were to make another account, I would not allow trading boss armor for latent aura. That way, I'd be more incentivized to enhance my Granil to up to Tet or maybe even Pen. Okay, tangent over. Because I was so close to getting all of the latent auras I needed, I decided to give boss rifts a go, because last time didn't go so well. I was actually successful even if they did take a long time to kill. After doing Red Nose, I realized that I had more hard black stones, so I did some more attempts on my armor. I got them all to try along with my Awakening weapon. It was one of the harder things to watch back. Why, you might ask? Because I croned every single attempt. I will say that I was extremely afraid of enhancing when I started this account, so that's the reason I croned, and it makes sense to why I did it, but it was still awful to watch back. After enhancing, I ended the episode by finishing up the Medaya questline, and I mentioned doing the Magnus at some point, but I never showed it, so I'm just gonna assume I did it. Episode 6 was all about finishing everything I wanted to do before heading out to Valencia. This involved me doing every suggested quest in the Black Spirit that was within the areas up to Medaya. While working on those quests, I was doing any bosses that spawned, getting me ever closer to my first boss piece. Sorry, cover your ears. I did some croned attempts on my witch's earrings, getting it to duo. And by the way, all of these crons that I've been using came from codes. Specifically the Calpheon ball code from like 2 years or like a year ago. And honestly, I do regret using those, but I did use all the crons. So at this point, there's nothing I can really do about it, which is one of my 2 biggest regrets on this series. The next one comes up in episode 8. I killed enough bosses during that time to get 100 latent aura, and I went and got a dandelion weapon, which I immediately started enhancing. I got it up to try, and realized that it didn't cost that many crons for a Tet attempt, and so after 12 attempts, I had a Tet Awakening weapon. After getting that weapon, I got my fairy to level 20 and sadly got Morningstar. That means I had nothing good on my fairy. After that, I ended the episode by killing a bunch more bosses, and I downgraded my Witch's Earring to Pry. Episode 7. Took my first steps into Valencia. This was super exciting because this is actually where the real grind zones start. Grind zones in Medaya don't give very much money and they don't have any notable drops, but this is the first place that isn't true. There's a Tannis element, and the trash at these spots is actually worth something, although not nearly as much as endgame spots, but at least it's worth over 100 million in most of the spots per hour. The first order of business was to start on the quest line, but I realized that these quests gave combat XP, so I went off and got a Chenga Tome. These quests brought me into Bashim's base to kill monsters, so I started grinding and ended up doing an hour, and I got my first Tannis element, which was super exciting. During that hour, I did actually get 3, but the first one was kind of a big deal to me. I also hit level 59. I also do allow alt killer characters, so I decided to make one so that I could have a boss alt. I tagged it to gain XP, and while I was running back, I realized that I had a bunch of weakened Azula's accessories, so I enhanced rings and an earring to duo. I also enhanced my Ornbow to duo. After doing that, I finished off my knowledge at Bashim's, and I got knowledge at Centaurs. I then moved on to Gahaz, which was awesome because the amount of money I was able to make there. I got all of the knowledge there except for the mini boss, and finished all of the quests where they sent me to the actual desert where I made this beauty of a cinematic. It's time to officially step foot into the desert and see what treasure awaits us. Did you guys like that? Just look at that camera work. Episode 8 is where I made one of the 2 choices on this account that still haunts me to this day. Obviously, the first one I said was using codes, and the second was that I started using Jatina. I exchanged my Dandelion weapon with Jatina, which officially locked me into using only her to upgrade it. It's only 4 episodes later that I decided to change the rule, so wait till the next recap, which if you watch this the day it comes out, that will be tomorrow. I will explain my thinking then, but just know that I hated doing this. After doing that horrible thing, I claimed my tag XP and got my Sork up to level 57, which is good enough for me to be a boss alt. I untagged her, and then I made a witch to tag for another boss alt. After creating her and tagging her, I started on the desert portion of the Valencia questline, which eventually took me down to Crescent Shrine. I decided that I did want to grind an hour here, and as I arrived, my camel died, which meant I couldn't stack loot, so I had to walk all the way back, go get my camel, and then actually park it in a safe spot this time. Out of that, I got 1 Tannis element and 4 shattered rings, so I really didn't get much. I did some inconsequential enhancing that netted me nothing, and I finished up the Valencia quest, and also the Magnus quest right after up to the Valencia portion. Because of how nice the travel and everything is, I decided that I was just going to finish the Magnus quest, so I went and did the whole thing. Obviously, the Magnus quest drops Pen boss armor, which has been sitting in my storage since March of 2024, and I never opened it. That was until yesterday when I was grabbing footage for the introduction, and I trashed it, so it's gone now. After finishing up the Magnus quest though, I decided to go get a tent for my next grind session at Desert Fogans. I did 2 hours there, getting 4 Tannis elements and 4 Serap's necks, which I immediately blew up all 4 of those on a 75% chance. After that, I did an hour at Naga's and actually upgraded a Serap's necks to Pry, and then immediately blew it up going for Duo. I then went off to Kadri's and got some knowledge, but not much else. I also got 107 scrolls from doing all that grinding. Episode 9, off with me showing my farms. One thing that you might not have thought of is that carrots from vendors is not enough to sustain constant running on a horse. and that farming is the only way to get special quality carrots. So this was a happy moment because I got my first special carrot seed. The next little while, I was gathering crystals for reform stones for my weapon. I reformed my dandelion weapon up to reform level 2, which increased it by 2 AP, and then I got my Ring of Crescent Guardian from Jatina, which I got up to Pry. After this, I did the Land of Morning Light quests, which took like 6 hours, and unlocked the boss shrines. After doing those, I claimed the bags from the adventure log, and I got nothing out of them. Then, I wanted to keep leveling up my Jatina ring, so I went back to Gahaz for more sealed black magic crystals to get more magical shards. After getting what I needed, I still needed to go get the red crystals, but while I was on the way, I did my dark rifts. This is where I got this.
Oh, I just got Remnants of the Rift. That is so good.
A Remnants of the Rift is super exciting because that means I can make a black star eventually. After upgrading this, I went to go grind Desert Nagas, and while I was there, I had a great Marnie's box drop, meaning that I needed to kill 20,000. This is super good for the stage in the account that I'm at because this can drop some really good items. While I was grinding, I ended up enhancing a Serap's Neck to Duo, which was great. Also, during that hour, Stormbringer Karanda spawned, so I hopped on my boss ult, and I got this. I'll just show you my reaction.
Okay. Need to make sure I actually get a hit here. Okay, time to run.
Alrighty. Just killed Stormbringer. Let's see what we get. Oh, I cheered? Heart of Karanda? No way I just got Heart of Karanda. That's insane. Holy shit. I am so carried. I don't even know. I'm so just in awe. I'm just speechless right now. I'm not clicking this off my screen. That is so good. I then finished my hour and tried enhancing my Seraps, but get this. I used Crons again. Honestly, it's disgusting. It dropped to Pry. With the money and magical shards I got from Nagas, I went and upgraded my ring to Duo. While I was doing that, night came around, so I went over to the black market and ended up rolling a Turo's belt. I decided it probably wasn't worth grabbing, but check out this next roll. I got a Kudum weapon box. That means I just saved 100 latent aura. Of course I started enhancing it, and I got it up to Pry. I ended the episode with the determination to go get more memory fragments so that I could enhance it further as soon as possible. Episode 10. Instead of going to get those memory fragments, I decided to work on adventure logs. Of course. The theme of this episode was distractions. Now, if you don't know about Bartoli's adventure log, it gives permanent stats, so I have to do it at some point, so I might as well just get it over with. I finished chapter 2, and along the way, I killed dark rifts while I was traveling, and that brought me up to 100 latent aura. With those, I was initially planning on buying a Kudum, but I got that in the last episode, so I decided to go buy Red Nose armor. Because I had some stacks already on my band, I decided to enhance my Kudum first, and I ended up bringing that up to Try. I got my Red Nose up to plus 14, but ran out of memory fragments. But instead of going to go get more memory fragments, I got distracted and continued on my adventure logs. I finished chapter 3, and then I went and got memory fragments. With just over 200 in hand, I was able to use my crons to get it up to Tet, and I also got my bow to Tet, where I failed 16 attempts in a row, and then finally got it on attempt 17. After that, I went back to Nagas to do more grinding, even though I was planning on doing adventure logs. As I said, I got distracted. After finishing up at Nagas, I did another attempt on my Pry Seraps, and it downgraded to base. But at least I got it back to Pry after that. As you might have noticed, I stopped showing a Tannis. I'm not going to show those until I get a potion piece, but just know I did get a lot. Finally, back on track, I finished chapters 4, 5, and 6, and I was torn because I had to give away my Serap's Neck that I had been using. Luckily, before I had to do that, the field bosses spawned, so I went and did those instead. While those field bosses were going, I got enough drops to bring up my fairy to level 30. Guess what I got? I got Inexhaustible Well. That means I have Fairies tier, Morningstar, and Inexhaustible Well. By the way, I re-rolled the Tingling Breath to Fairy's tier. Unlucky, hopefully the next fairy will be better. Sucks that I lost to T4 already. After those bosses, I finished up chapter 7 and continued up until chapter 12, which is where you get 1 AP and 1 DP, and I could not finish chapter 13 because I only had 2 of the 3 items for Nuver, and I decided to end the episode there with the determination to kill Nuver in the morning and finish up the log. And that is the end of episode 10. If you made it this far, thank you so much. I really did leave out a lot, so if you enjoyed this video, those videos might be worth a watch. Watching them back made me realize even though I don't think the quality of the videos are good, they were still enjoyable to watch because of how excited I was and how much stuff I did wrong. If you are watching this the day it comes out, then expect to see part 2, which should be episodes 11 through 20, tomorrow. And if you are watching it later, then just check the playlist for the next part, or maybe you could start on episode 11 if you would rather watch the full series. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.